Hello, you lovely internet people. This video might end up having to be scripted because I am so bad at explaining things. So, let's get on to it. Today I will be talking about monitors and what to consider when choosing a monitor, the various specifications and whatnot. Now, the first spec you need to consider when buying a monitor is the monitor size. And the size is determined by how the length between two corners diagonally. So the length between your top left corner and your, oh man, I banged into something, whatever. Between your top left corner and your bottom right corner, and your bottom left corner and top right corner. That's obviously the same length, but just to tell you that it's the same diagonally, we all know this. So that is what determines whether a monitor is 17 inches, 18 inches, 19 inches, however amount of inches it is. It all depends on that length diagonally between corners. Now the next thing you'll run into when buying a monitor is the resolution. So the resolution is basically how many pixels are being displayed on your screen at once. So for example, 1080p is 1920 by 1080, meaning that that's 920 times 1080, which is how many pixels you have, which is around 1.97 million pixels. And then as you go higher and higher and higher, then you get more and more pixels. The more pixels you have, the more detailed the graphical image can be on your display. So that is resolution. Next up, we have aspect ratio. Now the aspect ratio refers to the amount of horizontal pixels to the amount of vertical pixels. So the standard right now for a widescreen monitor or TV, whatever, is 16:9. So for example, in a 1080p monitor, that's 1920 by 1080, so that's 120 times 16 and 9 times 120. So if you were to multiply that out, then you'd get 1920 to 1080, which is the same as 16 by 9. I mean 16 to 9. So yeah, that's how you get that type of aspect ratio. And I should probably stop talking to get on to my next point, which is contrast ratio. Now, I don't know how to explain contrast ratio very well, so I took it to the internet, and I'm gonna directly quote from Newegg's website, where it says oh man, I already messed up. The contrast ratio is the measurement of the difference in brightness from the darkest to the brightest portion on the screen. When a monitor has a higher contrast ratio, it means that the picture the monitor provides will have deeper blacks and whiter whites. And then the typical contrast ratio is usually around 1,000 to 1. Yeah, that's directly quoted from Newegg. I may have massacred it a little bit, but that is contrast ratio. On to the next point. Now we have response time, which is for an LCD panel. There is a current that's applied to crystals at a pixel. So the amount of time it takes for that crystal to turn on and off is the response time. So response time is measured in milliseconds. So that's that. Usually a good response time is maybe 5 milliseconds, and then for competitive stuff, like if you're super into gaming and stuff, 1 to 2 milliseconds. But typically any response time under 10 milliseconds is perfectly fine. And usually monitors, the average is usually 5 for an IPS panel, and then the TN panel is usually always 2 nowadays. So not much discrepancy in milliseconds of response time, but the only time you really need to look at response time is if you're really into gaming and you really want a super low response time for your gaming stuff. But other than that, response time is not really something you really need to look at too much, unless it's some insanely high one. for whatever reason. Next up, we have brightness. So for brightness, all that really matters is that the brighter your monitor is, the better it works in brighter conditions. Just like, for example, when you think about your phone and brightness on your phone. So if the brightness is super high on your phone, then it works well in the sun because the sun is super bright. But if your brightness isn't high enough, then it looks really bad in the sun because the sun is way brighter than your phone. That's basically brightness. And next on our long list of stuff is the connectors of your monitor. Now, this ranges from VGA, DVI, HDMI, and DisplayPort, and maybe Thunderbolt, but not that many monitors actually use Thunderbolt, so let's not talk about Thunderbolt too much. But yeah, on most GPUs you'll find at least a DVI port, and on laptops you'll find at least a VGA port. So that's that. If the monitor most monitors have VGA and DVI, but if you have a device that's like, say, a console that uses HDMI, you'll have to look for a monitor that has HDMI. And then let's say you have a G-Sync monitor, and G-Sync monitors only work with with DisplayPort, so you have to make sure your graphics card supports DisplayPort. Most do, so you don't have to worry about that. But then you also need the cord for DisplayPort, so remember all that stuff. And that is connectors. Now on to viewing angles. So viewing angles is the amount of degrees horizontally and vertically that you can see the monitor without the colors washing out. So let's say you have a horizontal degrees of 180. So that means if you're looking at the computer from 180 degrees, then it will still look perfectly fine compared to looking at the computer dead on. That's the best I can explain it. There's probably better ways to explain it out there, but that's overall the main thing. It's more typical in phones with viewing angles than computer monitors, because most of the times with a computer monitor you're looking at it dead on, so there's usually no problem. But then you have IPS panels, all that stuff, but let's not talk about that right now. Okay, next is display colors. Now the display colors it tells you how many colors the monitor can display, pretty much. The more display colors you have, the better the monitor is, the more accurate the colors on the monitor are. And that's where the discrepancy between a TN panel and an IPS panel occur, where IPS panels have more display colors than that of a TN panel, but there are some TN panels that try to get higher and higher display colors so that it's cool and awesome and accurate, but most of the time an IPS panel is the best with display color. Okay, two minor points to talk about are monitors with built-in speakers. So there's that. There's a monitor that has a built-in speaker, and there are monitors that don't have built-in speakers. If the monitor doesn't have built-in speakers, you'll have to use external speakers. If the monitor has built-in speakers, they're usually crappy, but let's not talk about that type of thing. I don't think it's necessary to get a monitor with built-in speakers, but if you really want to, you can. And the second point is whether or not your monitor is VESA compatible. Now this isn't as minor as I might think it is, but most monitors have a VESA mount, but VESA mounts are basically the thing on the back of the panel that allows the monitor to be attached to an external monitor stand rather than the stand that it comes with. So let's say you want a dual monitor, you have this dual monitor stand that's VESA compatible, so you need a monitor that's VESA mount compatible, so then you can mount that monitor onto that particular, mount the two monitors onto that particular stand. And that is that. To find out whether a monitor is VESA compatible or not, you have to look deeply into the specs, because sometimes it can be relatively hard to find, unfortunately. And the final important point, there are a ton of other minor points, but this is the final important point, is the refresh rate, which is the amount of frames the monitor displays per second. This is usually measured in hertz. Most monitors are 60 hertz, and then higher than that would be 144 hertz monitors. So those are the two main ones. There are some 120 hertz monitors still out there, but 120 has been phased out by 144, so there's that. So that wraps up this video on different specs of a monitor. If you liked it, like. If you disliked it, dislike. And leave a comment letting me know why you like or dislike respectively, and any other questions you may or may not have about monitors. May or may not have, that doesn't make any sense. And above all, don't forget to subscribe for more content, maybe like this one, and hopefully I can actually deliver the content, because I am just busy all the time now because of school, and it's just so annoying. Wish I didn't have to deal with it, but that is a story for another day. Until then, bye.